Welcome back to Choosers of the Slain. I'm Lucas,
And I'm Nate.
and we're coming back at you after a couple weeks off. We've been working on a bunch of things, getting ready for a tournament that we're holding at the shop. We've also been kind of just buried under an avalanche of big game state changes with new codexes and Eldar facts and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff going down. Big one of them being the shift to Grand Tournament 2021. So we definitely have lots of new things that we can talk about. But I will say there has been a decent amount of negativity about like the GT 2021 release,
Yeah.
and kind of maybe a 60-40 split on thoughts regarding the Drukhari. We'll just call it a fac and errata. Some folks will call it a nerf or that the army got gutted.
Yeah.
So what I kind of wanted to do was to focus more on the positive when it comes to those things. There's been tons of press out there, complaining or whinging about the various things that have just recently changed. I figured, from us, let's just stick to what good came out of it. So if I were to say to you, Nate, Grand Tournament 2021, what are one or two things that came out of that you're looking forward to and that you're happy with that it adjusted the game?
So I like a lot of the changes to the secondaries.
Okay.
I think especially Titan Hunter is a much needed and pretty major change. It doesn't penalize knight armies so heavily. It doesn't penalize armies like AdMech, or Craft World Eldar, or Imperial Guard or Astra Militarum, whatever you want to call it, that might want to bring a super heavy. The other big thing kind of along those lines is the change to super heavy auxiliary detachments, where if it's got the same faction keyword as the detachment your warlord's in, then it only costs you 1 command point instead of 3. That's a very welcome change, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think both of those make pretty significant changes to play styles and armies that were kind of struggling in a lot of ways. So it's nice to see some of that happening.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And you took one right out of my mouth there with the super heavies.
Oops.
That's quite all right. I'm glad we're on the same page, because that's something that it kind of felt like, just like you mentioned with Titan Slayer, kind of almost victory pointing knights off of the playing field.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was too easy to get scored on, and so it disincentivized the use of a really interesting faction. And I think that the change to the super heavy auxiliary detachment is the same kind of thing. Like, you've got a ton of Astra Militarum players who just were letting Bane Blades collect dust because it was just not worth bringing them. So that's really nice to see. I did like a lot of the changes to the secondaries as well. I know that there are some out there that might kind of scoff and go, well, that's all that changed in the book. But there's some pretty significant, like, kind of ripples that creates to the overall game. Even though the missions are generally the same missions, how you play them and how you approach them, how you build for them. The game lives and dies in your secondary choices.
Oh, for sure.
And so those adjustments, I think, were really good for the game. And I think that with a lot of kind of the lack of the missions changing, or the cost of the book, or the changing, or how the binding changed, there's a lot of things that people were focusing on. And I think it's really important to take a moment and go, you know what, though? Retrieve Octarius data is better than deploy scramblers. And that affects things.
Yep.
Separating within their ranks and bring it down a little bit more by taking vehicles out of what is it called now? No prisoners, or whatever it is they changed the name of.
Yep.
That used to be thin their ranks. Taking vehicles out of that completely makes it a more meaningful choice, where you're like, I'm choosing to hunt the non-vehicles, or I'm choosing to hunt the vehicles. Whereas before, bring it down and thin their ranks had enough overlap that it was kind of a, what flavor do you prefer?
Right. Well, and thin their ranks a lot of times is kind of a trap, in that if you were playing anything that had a lot of 2 wound models, you might as well not take it.
Yeah,
it's just not
absolutely.
worth it.
Yeah. so for the armies that it targeted them very, very well, and for everybody else, it was just kind of pointless.
Yep.
So just a lot of those little adjustments, I think, were really good, and I think they can be celebrated. The game is moving in a positive direction, as as much as we might stumble along the way.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
So
I still remember 10 years ago when the idea of getting a new mission pack meant that it wasn't something that was going to see tournament play because it came bundled with a bunch of rules for apocalyptic flyer Saurus Rexes or whatever.
Yeah, back when the game was much more narratively driven than it is now, which we'll touch on later.
Yes, indeed.
Foreshadowing. But yeah, so I think there were definitely some good things that came out of it. And that, I think that just bears worth mentioning. So I'm mixing my metaphors or euphemisms or whatever words we're doing here.
That's fine.
But I just think it doesn't all have to be doom and gloom.
No, I agree.
But moving on to stuff that's a bit more hype driven and less trying to salvage the positive from the negative. Two major codex releases that are definitely shifting the meta a bit. So if we were to start with AdMech, what do you think are some big takeaways from AdMech?
Well, this one's going to apply to both, and it ties in kind of nicely with the GT21 discussion as well, and the changes to secondaries, and that I think with AdMech and Sisters, it is becoming abundantly clear that armies that have a 9th edition codex have a little bit of an advantage in the secondary world due to their codex specific ones. There are, I cannot recall the names of either off the top of my head, but there are at least one secondary in both of those books that I won't say is an auto take, but is certainly an easy choice.
Yeah, I would. As somebody who collects both armies, I definitely think with AdMech, actually, it's a hard choice between a few good ones. Sisters, I think maybe less so. Sisters, a couple of them are good, but AdMech, like it's actually hard to pick which one you want, and you have to actually look at like what categories are they competing with and what other secondaries are you having to give up to choose them. I definitely think that it was a big shift, and the more codexes we get that have those, the more level the playing field's going to get. When only Space Marines had Oath of the Moment, when or when Necrons are activating ancient machines or awakening machines or whatever it's called, when and you're playing a codex that doesn't have your own. It sometimes does feel like, man, I wish I had that.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely nice just to see any codexes come out to level that secondary codex specific category playing field.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, beyond that, I just think I think with the Drukhari book coming out a few months ago and seeing the way the rules play out in the AdMech book and in the Sisters book, I think we're starting to see a trend towards games of 9th being point-wise a lot more focused on playing the mission, which has been the case since 9th came out. But as more and more books come out, I think it's becoming more and more of a situation where the games are getting, for lack of a better term, bloodier. Stuff is dying faster, and so you're having to make more difficult choices in terms of, okay, where am I gonna devote my resources to try and keep as many points in the game as I can, and it's forcing a slightly different take on a lot of the gameplay, in that now, instead of just trying to kill as much stuff as possible, you're going to have limited use of a lot of your things. And so you want to make the best use of them to do either the damage or to get the points, before they get wiped out. You
Yeah.
know, it's you can't rely on a tank necessarily to survive to turn 4 and be able to kill a bunch of stuff. Like sometimes you've got to forego shooting with that tank because you know it's going to die either way. But if you can cap a point with it for, you know, at the beginning of your opponent's turn, you can deny them 5, and that's a, you know, that's a big deal. So
Yeah.
it's kind of shifting. Not only is it shifting the focus more towards the way Ninth did, where, you know, where objectives and the mission itself are the really important things, and the secondaries are important there. But it's also it's kind of moving the game in a way where it's not unusual to see a bunch of your models getting pulled off the table really fast unless your army focuses on durability over damage.
Well, and I think that um, kind of shows, to me, I guess, an evolution of the game in a way that does, it makes it more tactical, makes it more strategic, but it also kind of still gives a nod to the folks that just want to roll dice and pick up models.
Yeah.
You know, I, as somebody who has, you know, coached 100 people to play the mission, play the mission, there are still players out there who just like to play to kill. And the fact that the game is like subtly shifting to where winning really does come down to who played the mission better, who controlled the board better, but it's being done at like a more frenetic, like bloody pace, which hopefully makes it fun for the players who do want to just like imagine that their dudes are gunning other dudes down with machine guns, you know. And so I would like to believe that it's a very intentional game design decision to try to make the game approachable and fun for everybody, while also kind of shoring it up as a more tactical experience and less of a, you know, beer and pretzels kind of casual game.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think you used one specific word there that I think is a really great thing to focus in on. That's the idea of the pacing of the game. In that it is definitely clear that they are focusing more on pacing the game to be slow and destructive in the first few turns, so that the late game is faster but more tactical in a lot of ways.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the tournament event pack for the US Open events came out just a week ago maybe.
Yes.
And they actually break down what they expect a game's timeline to look like, and it's basically like each player's first 2 turns are expected to be about 20 minutes each, and then each turn after that is about 10 minutes each. So I mean, you think about that, 10 minutes is not a whole lot of time in terms of playing out an entire turn, except now it's starting to get to be more like, well, by turn 3 or turn 4, you know, you have a couple of squads that are on their last legs, and maybe 1 or 2 full strength squads, and a few characters laying around. You know, you're not, because of how destructive the game is now and how fast paced the first couple turns are in terms of dice being thrown versus models being picked up. Those last couple turns just fly by.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, you know, we've said before, I don't know if we've said it in, you know, in recording or just in conversations, but the, you know, a game of 40K does not really represent the entire battle that's happening. It represents like the 30 seconds or 5 minutes that mattered. And I think that kind of game pacing makes sense, because the first battle round is basically that moment when, you know, it hits the fan. It is the like, you know, everything has been fighting for hours or weeks or days or whatever to get into position, and now is the thrust. And so your first battle round is the 2 waves crashing into each other, and then the rest of it's just the chaos of the moment as you play out the part of the battle where the tide turned. And I think that pacing really matches that, where it's like, it's just this big cacophonous like storm on the first and second battle round,
Mhm.
and then the rest of it's just, you know, running and ducking and, you know, diving under things and trying to scramble for every you know, scrap that you can get, because both sides have just been crippled.
Right, right. Well, I mean, you look at historical military conflict too, and most of the time, what decided the battle isn't the first 15 minutes. It's
Mm-hmm.
the things that happened. The things that happened towards the end when both armies were, or all armies involved, were on. We're running on fumes, and
Mm-hmm.
the really the key decisions start getting made, and sure, there are key decisions early on, and that's something that is represented well in 40K too. Your decision to pinpoint one unit for destruction early on can make a huge difference later in the game. But how you move your troops on turn 3 and turn 4 is oftentimes more important than what you're shooting, and whether you killed that one particular tank, or you killed that one Razorback on turn 3.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Absolutely.
was it in a key spot? Because then, yeah, sure, it was important. But if it was just hanging out there, mm, it was probably more about putting your troops in the right spot and maybe denying the charges that you needed to, or hiding a key unit or whatever.
That makes sense. And I think also, to kind of bring it full circle,
Mm-hmm.
having codexes in the mix now that are not just a different flavor of Space Marines,
Yes.
is really helping us see what ninth is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, prior to Drukhari, virtually everything was a kind of Space Marine. And so having like, okay, we've gotten some Xenos stuff, we've gotten the T3 armies,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
starting to appear. We're starting, the camera is now zooming out enough that we're seeing more than just, the war between Space Marines and Necrons. And we're starting to see, because, Necrons, in a way, while they are certainly obviously not a Marine army, if you look at them, they are kind of a Marine equivalent army. You're talking toughness 4, you're talking 3-up armor saves, you're talking
Yeah.
um uh, uh a solid amount of mid to shorter long range
Yeah.
solid firepower, with the occasional island of really long range, really powerful firepower. I mean, they are cut from a similar cloth as the Marine armies from a game design standpoint. They just trade, basically they trade psychic powers for their own unique mechanics, but like,
Yeah.
they have some statistical similarities. So seeing the other armies starting to appear, is really giving us a broader picture of what ninth is supposed to look like. um and I guess, well, before we move on, um any thoughts, specifically, aside from the secondaries, specifically to like things that you thought were cool about the Admech Codex or the Sisters Codex, before we move on?
So I don't want to go so far as to say I thought it was cool. I'm still mulling over how I feel about it in particular, but I think it's interesting the way they changed Rangers and Vanguard in AdMech
Okay.
to deal with their special weapons. And the
Mm-hmm.
fact that, as it's written right now, you get way more of them than you used to.
They did the same thing with Sisters.
Did they?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm definitely curious to see. I'm definitely curious to see how that plays out with other stuff, because that's not what they did with Drukhari. Um, they they did with witches, kind of, but with like with Cabalite warriors, it is one special weapon for 5, and then one heavy weapon and an additional special weapon if you hit 10. And then for every 5 models, you get one more special weapon and you get one more heavy weapon at 10. But unless I'm misunderstanding how like the AdMech one works, it's not It's not like if you have 5 models, you can take one special weapon, and if you have 10, you can take um, you can take a blaster and a shredder and a dark lance, and then it. So I guess now I'm confusing myself. The AdMech one, is it at 10 you get one of each?
So how it's worded is if the unit is 9 or less models,
Mm-hmm.
one ranger or vanguard can exchange their standard weapon for anything from the various
Right.
lists, right? Then when you hit 10 models, it shifts to for every 10 models, one can switch X for Y. And the each weapon for the Skitarii
Mm-hmm.
is its own bullet point. So once you hit 10 models, one Skitarii can trade their standard weapon for a transuranic arquebus. One of them can trade their standard weapon for an arc rifle. One of them can trade their standard weapon for a plasma culverin, etc., or plasma caliver. Sorry,
Yeah.
culverins are the heavy set
Yeah.
calivers. Um, and so what it ends up being is if you have a unit of 20 Skitarii Rangers, for instance, you could have 2 transuranic arquebus. You could have 2 arc rifles. You can have 2 plasma calivers, because each, the plasma caliver, the arquebus, and the arc rifle are all their own bullet points that are 1 for 10.
Right. Right.
Um,
Okay.
and for sisters, they did, if your squad is 9 or less,
Mm-hmm.
one sister can trade her bolter for a special or heavy weapon.
Oh, okay.
At 10, you get 1 per 10 special and 1 per 10 special or heavy. So at 20, you could have 2 sisters who can pick from the special list and 2 sisters who can pick from the special or heavy list, resulting in a squad of 20 sisters able to get 4 storm bolters, or 2 heavy bolters and 2 storm bolters, or 4 flamers, or 2 flamers and 2 multi-meltas.
Okay.
Because at 20, you end up with 4 girls who can change their weapons, 2 of them one way and 2 of them another way.
Okay. So I guess it's not really any different than the way they did it with Drukhari then, because actually, if anything, it's a little more restrictive. Because with Drukhari, for instance, if I had a squad of 20 Cabalite warriors, the way it's worded, I could take 4 blasters and 2 dark lances.
Okay, that's very similar to how the Skitarii work. Theirs are just, like you said, a little bit more restricted because each weapon is its own bullet point.
Right.
So it is like, you couldn't choose to have 4 arc rifles. You can still only have 2 arc rifles. You just can also have 2 other things.
Yeah.
So
okay. That makes sense. I like seeing that. I think that's a nice change. I think the shift that we have seen for all the toughness 3 armies that have come out so far in 9th to have their base troop squads go up to a max of 20 is kind of interesting. I wasn't all that surprised to see it for Drukhari. I wasn't all that surprised to see it for AdMech. I was pretty surprised to see it for Sisters.
I think for Sisters, a lot of people forget because nobody really did it. Sisters could go up to 15 already.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't even know that.
Most people fielded them in minimum size units. And so I think it just kind of fell out of the collective consciousness that in 8th edition you could have 15 sister units.
Interesting.
So the shift to 20 was, I think, if anything, it was just to bring them in line.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What about I also think
you play both books. What are your thoughts?
So big things. I love Castellan robots.
Okay.
I'm a little, so I love them. It's one of my favorite kits in the game. And I also love on kind of the narrative side, I love that they are these ancient things that are in disrepair and that half of the time the robots that are fighting with an AdMech army didn't actually come with them. They were just already on the planet.
Mhm.
And when the, when they detected the Wi-Fi of the army,
Yep.
they just sort of show up.
Here, you
You know,
guys got
I
free Wi-Fi.
yeah, yeah, there's a narrative quality to them that I like. It also lends itself to really interesting like custom paint jobs and stuff, because each unit of robots they don't have to be painted to match your army,
Yeah.
because they're not actually from your army. I really dig them. And they while I would like the Aegis protocols to still raise the invul and save from five up to 4 up,
Mm-hmm.
because for as expensive as they are, it'd be nice if they lived a little bit longer. Okay, if they felt that that was too much, that's fine. But what I love is that they are no longer just gun bots or punch bots. I love that now the natural equipment for a Castellan robot is one gun hand and one fist hand, and both hands can be switched independently. So you can choose to have double fists, or
Mm-hmm.
you could have fist and gun, or whatever. I love that, because it's just another way to customize a unit that I already liked.
Yeah.
And from a tactical standpoint, there were times where you wanted to be able to fight in close combat, but like you were really putting them in your unit or in your army for fire support.
Right.
And so it was so either or before, and now you could choose to run a squad that's got like a phosphor blaster on its shoulder mount, one phosphor blaster in its hand, and then one fist, and you could kind of make them feel more like miniature dreadnought units
Yeah.
instead of so that's something I'm really looking forward to because I can expand my collection of my Castellan robots. Number is best expressed as too many.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But that's
And
just because I don't like them when I have to kill them or get
and
killed by them, more realistically.
I'm from where I'm sitting right now, I'm looking up at my wall of shame at a still wrapped in cellophane box of two more.
Nice.
So I love Castellan robots. I just do. So seeing those changes, I was really happy about. It totally makes sense to me that Cataphrone battle servitors are bikes. That's what they should have been to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those things are great. I love that Daedalosus got kept in the form of a techno archaeologist, instead of him just going legends because he's from a board game. I like those things
Mm-hmm.
a lot. I am the changes to the Scutari Eyes data sheet. Love that. I don't know what I think of the dual flyer drop pod combo special ability that the Archaeopter transport. I'm trying to remember what it's called, the transvector or whatever.
Yeah.
The that like pair them together so that they act as a drop pod and hit the table on turn one thing is really intriguing to me, so much so that I may or may not have ordered a couple transvectors so that I could have it in my collection. I don't know if it's tactically viable, but it's just the idea of two like ornithopters, because that's what I call them based on the magic card.
Essentially what they are.
Yeah. Imagining them like doing like a choreographed like spiral swoop onto the battlefield and dropping off the unit together, like that just appeals to me visually in my head. I just have no idea whether or not it's a good idea to do.
I can't help but hear yakety sax when I when I visualize that.
That's fair. Yeah, I just there's a lot of stuff in that book that I like. So I'm really excited to kind of keep digging in it and seeing how my Mars collection fits into it, with a couple changes here or there that I'm making. Just pick up some more Cerberus Raiders, that kind of stuff. So I'm excited for that. Sisters, I loved that book cover to cover. Just absolutely was just super excited till I played a game, and then I still love so much of the changes, and I like the adjustments they made. They definitely took a little bit of the wind out of Bloody Rose's sails, but that was needed because they were a little too much before.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm still adjusting to the drought of Miracle Dice, and so I'm still trying to figure out how to adjust my play style for that.
Seems to be a common theme.
Yeah, there's a bit of talk online trying to figure out like what the best way to overcome it is. The couple games that I've played since the Codex came out, it definitely didn't feel good. I think I've likened it in conversation to not drawing land when you're playing Magic the Gathering. You know, you've got all your
Yeah.
good cards in your hand and you just need a forest for it to work, and it's just not happening. And or you know, it would be this, I guess it'd be the same thing of you know, getting a, if you're playing euchre for regular card players, you know, if you've got a bunch of really high cards in your hand but none of them are trump. It's that kind of feeling where you're looking at it, you know, a situation arises in game and you're like, I have a shenanigan for exactly this situation and I cannot afford to do it. Was the feeling. And so could it just be me needing to adjust to the new way the codex is written? Yes. Could it be that they tightened the faucet a little bit too much on the flow of miracle dice? And it could be that too. I'm not sure yet. I've only got a couple games under my belt. But it does, I'm still processing. It feels like they added things that hunger for miracle dice to the codex to add characterful stuff like blessings and that kind of stuff while shortening the supply of the actual food that you need. So I'm trying to figure that one out, but I am absolutely willing to admit that it could just be that my play style needs to adjust. It may not be that it's not good. Just for those first couple games, it didn't feel great. So, but that said, I love the new units. I think Morphin Vol is maybe a little too powerful.
Yeah, her points will go up, no doubt.
Yeah, my personal theory is I'm not going to be surprised if the next time points get changed, she goes up like 50. She's really good.
Might be before that, based on what they did with the Raiders.
That's true. That's true.
Who knows?
Yeah, Morven Vol is really solid. I'm really looking forward to getting some Sacrosancts on the table. That unit just looks fun.
Yeah, they're cool.
Paragon War Suits. Yeah, Paragon War Suits look amazing. Their kit is super fiddly. So if you decide to make them, expect to have to put individual models together that are more than 40 pieces. But they look amazing. And they put out some hurt. They're not as durable as you would think looking at their stat lines, at least not in my experience. But I don't think that they're bad. I think they're fun. You just gotta figure out how to use them.
I am what I'm curious. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no. Go ahead.
I'm curious to see if they keep the rule as written that they are immune to damage one weapons.
So I was talking with somebody at the shop today about that. I feel like I'm granted, again, only played 2 games, but I feel like they are too expensive. If that -1 damage is minimum of 1, like everybody thinks it should be, where it only helps if it does more than 1 damage, then they're too expensive for what they do. If it's not errata and it's true that they're immune to damage 1 weapons, then that might put their durability where it should be for their cost.
Yeah.
And so, but if that's the case, that's like, it's a really good power. And so like I could also see that under certain circumstances that could be unbalancingly too good. And so they're like they're in a weird spot where they put out a ton of hurt. They're an awesome looking model. They make sense like for the role that they have to be kind of like a half retributor, half close combat squad. You know, and they're an elite unit. They're very clearly whether or not they're going to be good in the game for it or not, I don't know, but they're very clearly intended to be Morven Vol's like bodyguard, because they qualify, because she qualifies for Lookout Sir, and a unit of Paragon War Suits is built in a way that would allow them to trigger Lookout Sir, and they move at the same rate, they fight similarly, they have similar capabilities. And the Paragon War Suits would really benefit from the reroll auras that Morven Vol brings. So it is very clear from design philosophy that they're supposed to be paired together. I don't know if in practice that's actually going to end up being a good idea or not, but it's clear that was the intention. I like so much about them, but they're in that sweet spot between, if their rule gets errated one way, they're too expensive for where they sit. And if it gets errated the other way, they might be too good for what they cost. And
Yeah.
so it's hard to say, but they look awesome, and they're fun, and they're cool. The one that was kind of an unexpected bolt out of a clear blue sky for me is actually the tank that's not out yet, the Castigator. So they previewed some stuff about it before, in their various articles, but looking at the totality of the data sheet, it looks really good. And I know there are some people out there like, oh, it's too expensive for what it does. It's battle cannon. If you go with the battle cannon instead of the auto cannons, it is the equivalent of, I believe it's the Vanquisher cannon statistically, but it shoots the number of shots that a regular battle cannon shoots. So instead of being heavy 1 and stronger, it's still heavy D6, but it's strength 9. It's not like your standard Lehman Russ battle cannon. I believe it's the Conqueror's Vanquisher cannon or whatever.
Vanquisher might be 10.
What's the long barreled one that only shoots once?
That's the Vanquisher.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember what it's. I've got it right here. I'm just gonna quick look because now I'm curious. And of course, there's a billion weapons in the. Nope, Vanquisher is heavy 1, strength 8.
Okay, so it's better than that.
But it's AP minus 3, D6 damage, 72-inch range. Roll 2 dice, discard the lowest for damage.
Okay, it does not have that ability, but just as a straight stat line, it is the Sanctified Shell or whatever is closer to a las cannon in damage, and it's heavy D6. Yeah, it is gonna be a solid long range anti-armor weapon.
Is
and
it
then
D6
it also
damage?
Yes.
Okay.
And then it also has it's called a pyre shell, which is sort of like submunitions from the Tau railguns.
Yeah.
So it does not have to purchase one or the other. It just has, if you go with the battle cannon, you can fire either shell.
Oh, nice.
So it is. I'm really curious how that's going to end up. How that's going to end up playing.
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't, when I looked at the data sheet in totality, I was like, oh, this looks better than I thought it was going to be. So I'm really, really interested to see. Part of me wants to just, throw down a Predator for a couple of fun games and proxy it just to see, in practice, like how it plays out, since the kit's not out yet.
Right.
So those are kind of some highlights from things, from the 2 codexes from my perspective. So, I'm excited. Sisters is more my competitive army. I know AdMech is doing pretty solidly right now. I like my AdMech army. My AdMech army right now is kind of a side project because Sisters is one of my main armies. I'm planning on taking them. I registered for another tournament, planning on sticking with my Sisters as my tournament entry.
Nice.
That's kind of more where my focus is right now. But I'm definitely still slow growing my AdMech collection on the side.
Sure.
Still working on stuff for that because Mars Uber alles.
Oh boy. I see a lot of trying to kill Belisarius Call in my future.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a thing. Once I get my AdMech will probably like stay kind of off the radar or riding the pine or whatever you want to say until I get a handful of the units that I'm adding to the army painted so that I can put a fully painted army back on the table. And once I do that, there'll probably be at least a short period where that's primarily what I'm playing. And maybe if I can't figure out how to adjust to the new flow of Miracle Dice, I might take a break from Sisters and shift to AdMech so that I don't get burned out or angry about it.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm I'm just glad Wrath of Mars is only kind of dumb now instead of completely dumb.
Instead of completely dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. Well, at least, I mean, I had to give up something there, but my Scutaria, I get Canicles and the Omnisaya. So,
Well, there's that.
I mean, I can have a Doctrina Imperative at the same time as Shroud Psalm, so I can be in cover and have +1 ballistic skill. I mean, that's not too good,
Let
right?
me.
That's totally fair.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm crying in Craft World Eldar right now. But anyway.
You'll get a Codex like in 12th edition.
Yeah, that sounds about right. we won't have any new models by then, though. So,
yeah. Speaking of new codexes and new editions, that was a great segue set up there. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
We were recently asked what we would like to see Games Workshop develop that is not currently in the game or is currently underdeveloped in the game, and we hinted at a couple things in our last episode about various alien races or things we'd like to see. But before today's episode, we had a talk about that and kind of landed on something that we both would really like to see happen. And that would be, if we had to pick an area that we think is reasonable to happen or has a reasonable chance of happening, and would develop an area that they are currently not really covering, we would like to put forth the idea of Codex Supplement Renegade Astartes.
Yes, there is. I think there's a lot of room to play around with the idea of a chapter that has just recently fallen. There's a bit of a precedent for the idea of Renegade Primaris. We've seen some of that stuff in the past 6 months or whatever in White Dwarf articles and online stories and everything. So there's definitely room to play around there. And it would be nice for it to have a little more flavor than just I'm playing Codex Space Marines, but I'm going to say that they don't whisper the Emperor. Whisper? Worship is the word I was looking for.
They don't whisper the Emperor.
They don't listen to the Emperor's whispers.
There we go. Nice save. I think I think the other thing too is to be clear that we're not necessarily saying that it has to fall all the way to chaos. There have been plenty of stories of just chapters that have decided to go their own way or to just kind of shirk their responsibilities, and maybe they feel slighted by something that Terra did, or that they were put in a situation where they were just heavily decimated and they called for help and nobody came, and that was the kind of last straw. So seeing something that allows you to play without necessarily going like whole hog into chaos, but still having those options, I think would be a really, really neat thing to add to the game to help people who want to maybe play. Maybe they're interested in how Marines look, or they're interested in how Marines play, but they're not necessarily interested in playing like an Imperial Loyalist army, but they also don't like the Baroque spiky chaos boys. Something that kind of falls in between.
Yeah. And being able to focus a little more on chaos minus the demonic influence. I think is a direction that some people want to go.
Well, for sure. I mean, I know myself, I've thought many times about just using heresy pattern armors like Mark III or Mark IV and running them with a Chaos Legion, because I wanted them to look like Marines, but I didn't want them to be loyalist.
Right.
I also think that the easiest way to do this would be to make it we went back and forth about this, and it could go either way, but personally, I think the easiest way to do it would be to make it a Codex supplement for the Imperial Space Marine Codex, because then you don't have to reprint a billion data sheets in a Codex supplement for Chaos. You could just have, unique warlord traits and unique relics and, a renegade style chapter tactic that replaces their existing chapter. But that way it references the quote unquote contemporary Marine menu instead of referencing the Chaos Space Marine menu. And then, for a handful of things, like if you had possessed Marines, like say they did actually fall to Chaos, okay, reprint the possessed Marine data sheet in the Codex supplement, because even these modern Space Marines could still get possessed by bloodletters or whatever.
Sure.
But as far as like, instead of having obliterators, you have centurions, because they actually have centurions, because they used to be loyalists like 20 minutes ago. I think that is an area that Games Workshop could definitely expand in. It would fit their kind of, half of the game is supposed to be Space Marines kind of kind of vibe, and they sure do love power armor. You've got stories from 6th and 7th edition like the Bad Ab War. You've got all kinds of little insurrections. I mean, the Minotaurs chapter is supposedly exists to police other Space Marines, where if a chapter starts falling, the High Lords of Terra call up the Minotaurs and go handle them. That kind of stuff, I think is I think that would be a great way to expand things. It would kind of be in line with things they're already doing. I think it would be more realistic to happen than a full standalone codex for it to just be a codex supplement. But I certainly think the idea merits more than just a White Dwarf article.
Yeah, I'd say so. But then again, so does the Fallen, and we saw what happened there.
Yeah, I was not thrilled about that one.
Yeah. Anyway.
But yeah, so that would be kind of the thing that we would put forward as something that not only would we like to see developed more, but that has a reasonable chance of maybe happening someday. Would be a development of renegade chapters that are not necessarily Chaos Space Marines from 10,000 years ago.
Yeah, and I think it works nicely with kind of the roots of the game. We talked a little bit about how originally 40K was a very, very narratively driven game. You look at Rogue Trader, and it was basically space RPG in tabletop form. And then from there, it's just narrative played a huge part in so much of so much of the rule set, and so much of what books came out and what armies were getting released. And you had the Black Crusades, and you had all the different story supplements that introduced new ways to play different armies, and new alternative game modes. And I mean, even looking back to like 5th and 6th edition, where you were getting full apocalypse supplements, and you were getting Planet Strike, and you were getting Urban Assault, or whatever the city defense, or whatever they called it.
Cities of Death.
Cities of Death. Yes, that was it. And then there was the 6th edition one with the flyers, whatever that was.
Death from the Skies.
Death from the Skies, I think it was. Yeah, lots of death. But you have all these different narratively rooted games or game modes that also brought new rules with them, and frequently new models. And it kind of puts it into perspective that 8th and even more so 9th are really the first time I can think of that there's been significant focus on the competitive matched play side of the game. Outside of the game is balanced around points, and so everything has points, and that's that. But I think 8th and 9th are really the first time where they've really looked at and said, okay, matched play and narrative play are two different things, and rather than having a narrative game and throwing points on it for balancing, we're going to have two different game modes, and one of them is more heavily balanced, and so it's going to have not only points and everything, but also different rules in some places than than games that are more narratively focused. And then with 9th edition, we talked about how we're starting this up pretty soon here, but they kind of bridged that gap with the Crusade rule set. And giving you ways to play both of them together, and kind of meet in the middle, so it can appeal to appeal to a much larger group, instead of there being these kind of clusters of this play group only plays matched, and this play group only plays narrative, and this play group has one guy that wants to play narrative and everyone thinks he's a loser.
Well, and just it kind of brings it that full circle. They're making so many strides to make competitive 40K everything that the competitive players want it to be. But they're also kind of reaching back and bringing the, like you said, the game's roots along with it. And the fact that when you're playing in a Crusade, and you have your Crusade army, the fact that you can still log games against a match play list in the Crusade allows, like you said, you've got that one player in a play group who's really more focused on narrative play. Everybody else wants to play match play. Well, if that player joins an online Crusade, through some organization or some community that, say, uses Discord and invites you to join us and participate in the conversation there.
There's not a link in the description or anything like that.
Yeah, no, not at all. You might want to look to make sure, though, because we could be wrong. But if somebody were to join something like that, they could still play games with their friends and log those games for the online Crusade that they're participating in, no matter where they are across the world.
Yep.
Chooses the Flame Discord.
Yes. Well, and that's kind of our thing, is that I've been organizing the Crusade that we're going to be starting here, which the plan is to start it July 1st and have it run for third quarter of the calendar year. And
well, why don't you, since we're talking about it now, go ahead and kind of give us a look into what we're planning, since you're kind of championing that.
Sure. So the kind of the overall idea is that it is realistically a worldwide thing. Anyone can take part. They just got to join in online and submit their Crusade rosters and log a game. We're probably going to limit it to 1 game a week for logging. And then the hope is that it gets enough traction that we can run a few seasons of it that all take place in kind of the same overarching narrative structure, and have each season influence the next one based on who does what and who winds up in the top of the brackets and everything there, and also adds in some nice jumping off points for new players who maybe missed out on part of it but want to get in a little bit later on. So I think it should be a good time. I've worked up a bit of a narrative for it and set in in a system that's dubbed the Atropos system. Got consumed by a warp storm and is now transmitting messages that are dated 40 some years prior, being picked up, and there's some sort of disturbance going on there. It's wound up halfway across the galaxy from where it was charted previously, and with everything going on there and some of the rumors that are circulating around, there's a lot of different factions kind of converging to see what's up.
I'm looking forward to it myself. I'm using this as a springboard to re-engage orcs as one of my major loves for this game. So I'm very, very excited about getting involved in this Crusade and kind of building up Crump Snaga.
Yes.
So I'm very very excited. Have you decided for sure which faction you're going to be bringing to the Crusade?
No, I have not, and I really need to figure that out since I want it to start in like 2 weeks.
Fair enough.
I am so torn between. I've thought about just bringing my Drukhari and kind of moving that in a different way. I'm tempted to just indulge in a bit of masochism and bring craft worlds, but then there's a part of me that's like, man, it'd be kind of cool to mess with some ideas that I've had looking at the new Sisters stuff and have kind of went, well, that could be kind of fun, but it's a whole lot of new models. And then of course there's my original plan of Gene Stealer cults, which is like masochism times 2. And also involves a lot more models, so that one's probably gonna wind up being on the back burner. But I don't know. I'm still torn. I need to give it some thought, but I'm looking forward to seeing the orcs. What I've seen of them so far is looking great. So it's going to be cool to see them on the
thank
table.
you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I've been out of them for too long, and I'm just I'm excited to use this to kind of get back into them, and it's a nice kind of slow grow way to get back into a very very numerous army without having to just jump into the deep end with like 120 models that all need to get painted because I built them to play in a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and you picked a great time to do it too, because now now you've got new boys coming out, and you've got a bunch of new, the beast snagas and all that, and new war boss models, and who knows what else.
Oh, the new war boss and mega armor. I'm so happy about that.
He looks so good.
Yeah, he does. But that's kind of what we've got going on, and we would love for you guys to join us. So if you haven't yet, please, join the Choosers Discord, and when you're there, pop by. We've got a channel for the Crusade. Pop by there and express your interest. We would love to have you join us again, no matter where you are. If you can be reached by the sound of our voices, you can play in this Crusade.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the whole format that we're using is really designed to make it so it's not just limited to people who can get up to the local shop every week or whatever might be the case. Like it's meant to be a more casual, inclusive kind of thing.
Yeah, and we definitely want that to include you.
Yes.
So please, please join us. But I think that'll be good for us for this one. You think?
Yeah, I think so. That wraps it up, and I can go back to agonizing over what to start crusading with.
Well, I got a lot of orcs to paint, so that'll give me some time to do that. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Please come on by, talk to us, jump on Discord, not only look at the Crusade, but also, shoot questions at us, talk about, what events we've got going on, what kind of tournaments we're preparing for, pick our brains about various codexes, whatever, just jump in the discussion. We'd love to have you. And I guess we'll talk to you next time.
Absolutely. Stay safe out there, everybody.
All right. See ya.